and everything. And they think, oh, this man burns with zeal. And so, but what you have to understand is that when a man's in a pulpit or in an extraordinary situation, he will burn with zeal, hopefully. But oftentimes, when he comes out of the pulpit, you would be astounded at how normal his life is and how much it looks like your own. We've developed almost this celebrity type of Christianity where we think there's these special men, and actually all we have is a special God. And usually if God uses a man, it's not because he's the greatest, it's because he's the runt of the litter. And I'm not saying that just with some false sense of humility. It's actually true. If you go through the Scriptures, you will see that God always seeks out not the great men, but the weak men. So that when actually He does something, everyone knows it must be attributed to Him. So, what I want us to look at today, we're going to look at a few different passages if we have time, is that we know the Ten Commandments. But from where comes the motivation for obedience, for devotion? And we can see it here, and we'll see it more profoundly in the New Testament, but here we see it. It says, "Then God spoke all these words, saying..." Now, how does He start off? He starts off talking about Himself and what He has done for the people. He says, "I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery." There's two things I want you to see here. Why do we serve Him? Why do we think of Him? Why do we praise Him? Why do we thank Him and worship Him? First of all, He's God. If you can get your mind wrapped around that, it has transforming power. Every beat of my heart is the result of His will and power. Every beat of the heart of the greatest infidel on the planet is a result of God's graciousness. Every breath that I draw, if my mind functions at all with reason, it is a result of the grace of God. Yes, even reason itself, and we see that in Romans chapter 1, don't we? We see the loss of reason among a people who have separated themselves from God. They absolutely turn to absurdity. So every good and perfect gift, anything that I can put my finger on that is delightful, anything that would bring a smile to the face of even the unbeliever, is the result of God's graciousness. Now, if we were angels in heaven, that would be enough for us to worship throughout eternity. For even their lives are utterly dependent, like ours, upon Him. But we're not angels. We're clay. And not only are we clay, we're fallen masses of clay. You see, we don't simply deserve that God walk away from us or be neutral toward us. We deserve that He punish us. Do you see that? And yet we see the graciousness of God in our lives. I remember when I was at the university, I took a theater class, and I was extraordinarily interested in a certain play, Waiting for Godot. And it's this play where, for the most part, if you see it in the theater, it's a man, two men, sitting on a dark gray, dingy bench with a dark gray, dingy ground and a dead, dark gray, dingy tree engulfed in a blackness with the dimmest light. That should be us. That should be the whole world. You know, I was telling the pastor yesterday, isn't it extraordinary that no colors that God has in creation clash? You ever notice that? They all fit perfectly. There should be no colors. There should be no leaves. There should be no trees. There should be no births. There should be no weddings. There should be no joy. There should be nothing. The question is never, why do bad things happen to good people? The question is, why does anything good happen at all? You see, He's God. And that in itself is enough. We are utterly and completely dependent upon Him. I want to tell you something. I may repeat this throughout the sermon, but I want you to understand something. I am not a Christian because of the rules. I am not a Christian because I delight in homeschooling. I am not a Christian. If you really knew me, I'm wild. I care little for all those kinds of things. I'm a Christian because of Him. Because of Him. And the reason I don't leave it is because of Him. It's not because I delight looking at myself in the mirror and seeing a moral man or principled or anything else or educated. No, I'd throw it all away. It's because of Him. It's because of who He is. And to recognize that every good and perfect gift has come from Him as God. It's astounding. I love looking at astronomy and math and physics and the universe. And when I think where I am on the spectrum, if you think about space, it goes on and on and on and on. The mind can't comprehend. You can't comprehend it mathematically. There's just no model. And you say, yes, that's true. Well, you're forgetting something. It not only goes out, it goes in. It goes the other way. Where am I on that spectrum? From out there in space, further and further to microscopic. Where am I? I am a tiny, little, I'm not even a speck. In comparison to the universe, I'm not even a molecule. I'm not an atom. I'm not anything. I'm not even a blip. And yet, He concerns Himself for me. Even in my unconverted state, before I was a Christian. What is man that thou shalt take thought of him? Or the Son of Man that thou shalt be concerned for him? Why should we obey Him? Here the expression of obedience is the Ten Commandments. As we go on, it gets deeper and more profound. But why should we demonstrate piety or devotion before God? Because He is God. And that's the inescapable truth. And not only is He God, but He's a good God. And that goodness is most revealed in the second phrase. He says, I am the Lord your God. Now, He didn't get voted into that. One of the things that I may be taking a bypass here, but one of the things university students just seem not to be able to comprehend is that there actually is a reality. And you can close your eyes, you can redefine it, you can stick your head in the sand, you can do all sorts of things. It doesn't change the fact that there's a thing called truth. It's that which is real. There is a reality, and the reality is He's the Lord your God, whether you want Him or not. He would be the Lord your God even if He was evil. He's still the Lord your God. The fact of the matter is, He's not evil. He's good. So my obedience and devotion to Him should be a response to what I know about Him and what He has done for me. But now it goes further. Who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. What do we have here? We have here the kernel of redemption. Why should I serve Him? Not just because He is my Creator and my Sustainer, the one who holds together reality itself, but I should worship Him because He redeemed me. And this is the point where He is going to bring this back to Israel how many times? Almost every time Israel goes astray, almost every time Israel's apostate, He keeps coming back. I am the God who redeemed you. I bought you. And in the early stages, we understand that they were bought by the blood of a lamb. But then to us, to whom the end of the ages has come, bought by the blood of the Lamb. The Lamb. Now this is what I want you to see. What makes Christianity inescapable for me? It's not an ethic. It's not even heaven. The one thing that the true saints down through the ages found inescapable was redemption. Redemption. And we're going to follow that out here in a minute. We're going to go to the New Testament and we're going to see this over and over and over again. That there's this sense that we have been bought. Bought out of slavery. Bought out of condemnation. Bought out of death. Bought out of darkness. Bought out of the kingdom of the one who is fallen. There are so many ways to describe it, but the fact of the matter is what should control our life is the fact that God sent His Son, and His Son died for us. And for some of us, that's inescapable. We have no longer any choice but to serve Him. Now, I want to say one thing before we go into the New Testament. As a man grows older in his testimony, he begins to talk less and less about what he was prior to his conversion and more about what Jesus did for him. But even us older men, there are times when it is good to sit and think about what we were. I lament the fact that I was a terrible sinner. I was an unusual sinner. An extraordinary sinner. I lament that. But there are some ways in which, and please measure my language, put it in context, there is some ways it has been a great benefit to me. I know something of what I was. I know the things I did. I know that I deserve the very bowels of hell. I know if there are inner circles, and there appears to be, that I should be found in the last one, the deepest one. Now I lament that I have sinned against God, but it has helped me so much to know all I have is Christ. And when Christ was given to me, I deserved nothing of it. That the only thing I have contributed to my salvation is my sin. And that if He had cast me into hell, I would have had to raise my hands and say, the judge of all the earth has done right by me. And the fact that He sent His own Son to die for me, it's inescapable now. There's nowhere to go. Don't talk to me about religion. Don't talk to me even about church first. It's Him. It's what He did. That is the kernel and core of Christianity. He shed His own blood for my soul. Do you see that? Whatever He asks of us, we should concede, and joyfully. Why? He sent His own Son to die for our sins. It's all about the person of Christ. Now, that being true, I'm about to reveal to you the task of the preacher. And what is it? If it's the work of redemption that moves us to godliness and piety and devotion, then the more we know about that work of redemption, the more pious and godly we will be. And the pastor, the preacher's task Yes, it is to expose ungodliness and all other sorts of things, but above everything else, it is to reveal to you exactly what God did on that tree to redeem you, exactly what He gave, exactly how Christ suffered. And the more and more and more you know it, the greater and greater will be your desire to serve Him. The more you understand the cost. And you say, well, I understand the cost. No, you don't. And neither do I. As a matter of fact, many theologians, I being one of them, would say this, that those hours that He suffered in darkness, no one except the Trinity will ever understand the price that was paid for our redemption. It is far too great. Not even the archangels in heaven will ever comprehend that darkness that Christ suffered on our behalf. And that is the very thing that will break the hardest heart of the most wicked man. Christ died for me. That's what matters. That's all that matters. Everything else is small. Now, I want you to go for a moment to the book of Romans. And we'll just look briefly at chapter 12. Paul says in verse 1, "Therefore I urge you, brethren, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies a living and holy sacrifice acceptable to God, which is your spiritual service of worship." Now this idea of spiritual service of worship can also be reasonable, well calculated service of worship. And so what is that service of worship? Present your bodies as a living and holy sacrifice. Now, he uses the word bodies here. He doesn't say give your heart to Jesus. What does he say? He says your body. Present your body. Now the word present here is an aorist tense imperative, which means it's not talking about every week rededicate yourself. It's basically once and for all. It's that prophetic call. How long will you limp between two opinions? If Baal is Baal, if the world is your God, then serve the world. But if God is God, serve Him. Once and for all, make up your mind what you're going to do. So it's an imperative and it's aorist and it means now make a decision. Now what is that decision? To offer your body as a living and holy sacrifice. Now why does he say body, soma? Why does he say that? I mean body, that's what it's talking about. Why? Well, as a preacher and as a pastor at times I've had to challenge people and rebuke them, not just in a pulpit but privately. And oftentimes when I've said, you're living in a manner that doesn't appear Christian, usually the answer I get is, you can't see into my heart of hearts. And I say, I don't need to see into your heart of hearts because I watch what your hands and feet and mouth are doing. And he says body here instead of heart of hearts to let you know your heart of hearts. If Jesus has your heart, it's going to affect your body. You see, your heart in the New Testament, in the Old Testament, is literally the control center of everything you are. It's the control center of your will, your emotions, your desires, everything. And if Jesus has your heart, people are going to be able to see it in your body, in what you actually do. You will know them by their fruits. He's saying, offer all of you to Him. Not just your heart of hearts, but everything you are. Every fiber of your being without competing loyalties. That's the great call. And you say, well, has anyone ever achieved that? Jesus did. And the true Christian, does he achieve it? Not even Paul did. But what did he do? Laying failures aside and behind him, he kept striving forward. That the desire is that my heart would be totally yours. Oftentimes when I pray for someone's child or they ask me to pray, what I will pray is simply this, that this child will be known for their extraordinary devotion to Jesus. I don't say great preacher or great missionary, because there are great preachers and great missionaries whose heart does not belong to Jesus. Great in the eyes of the world. You see, when he says, blessed are the pure in heart, oftentimes we think of a heart that's white or no specks in it. That's not the idea so much as an unalloyed heart where there are no competing loyalties. So we desire that our heart be wholly given to Him, and we lament when it proves that it is not. When we press forward, studying the Scripture, fellowshipping with the saints, praying, using the means of grace, even the supper itself, that we might go on in greater devotion to Him. Do you see that? That's what He's asking us to do. Now, what you need to understand is that He's urging us to give away to give away everything. You know, the devil was even right in this when he said, yes, you've taken away all the materialism, all the materialistic things from Job, all his wealth, his family, everything. Touch his body and he'll curse you. God's saying, give me your body. He's saying, give me the most precious thing that you have. Give me all of you. Now, here's the question. Paul's urging us to do it, first of all. He says, I urge you, brethren. He's pleading with them. He's begging them. Imagine if a man could die and catch a glimpse of the other side and come back. If he could die and catch a glimpse of hell, would he not come back and urge people, please, don't? If he could die and catch a glimpse of heaven, even the smallest glimpse, would he not come back and go, I plead with you. I beg you with everything that I have. I beg you, please do not live for this age. There is a world coming. There is a life coming that is so great that if only you caught a fraction of it, it would explode your heart and shatter your psyche. It's so beautiful. Do not live for now. Live for Him. That's what Paul's doing. This is not a small thing. This is not like get your best life now. This is heaven and hell. This is life and death. It's ugliness and beauty. He's saying, I urge you, give your life, everything you are, to Him. Now, here's the question. Where is the motivation? What could motivate somebody? I mean, what would motivate a young man to give away his youth? What would motivate, the people I could mention right now? Hermana Doris, who lived in the jungle all her life. She was from Europe, and I met her. You could just tell. I met her when she was in her late 60s. You could tell she was an extraordinarily beautiful woman. Her whole life in the jungle. The cost. What could motivate somebody to do that? I mean, waste everything. Like the alabaster, break it and just pour it out. Just break your body and just pour it out. What on earth, what in heaven could motivate somebody to give the most precious thing they own away? And not just away, just lavish it. What could do that? Well, Paul gives us the answer. Therefore I urge you, brethren, by the mercies of God. Now, in Hebrew, Paul was a Jew. He's writing in Greek. When you want to say in Hebrew, look at that puddle. You use the singular, water. When you want to talk about something really big like an ocean, waters. The plural is important, and I think that carries over into the Greek. It's important. Mercy, singular, is just not good enough. It's why a lot of times, I know it's not proper to put excellency in the plural, but it's why I often use the word excellencies of God instead of excellent. mercy's not enough. It's the mercies, the multiformed mercies. There's just so many of them, and they're so great, and they're so varied. They're just beautiful. Like you take the largest diamond in the world and you turn it in the light of the sun, and you see just rays coming off everywhere. You can't even count the facets. He's saying, I'm urging you to do this based upon, because of God's mercies toward you. You say, well, what are those mercies? See that conjunction, therefore? Is very important. Paul is doing something here that he also does in the book of Ephesians. So in the book of Ephesians, the first 3 chapters is the most extraordinary literature about Christ and what He's done. All about Christ, who He is, and what He's done. So for 3 chapters, Paul wears himself out explaining to you, showing you what Christ has done for you, and then he says, therefore, live in a manner worthy of your calling. Based on what? What Christ did for you. Paul's doing the same thing again when he writes, therefore, in chapter 12, he's referring back to the first 11 chapters of Romans, where he sets out the gospel of Jesus Christ in an extraordinary fashion. So what is it? Based upon the fact that God has sent His Son to live and die for you. Now, give yourself away. Now let's go back to our theory, which is more than a theory, it's a biblical truth. So the more that you know about the glory and the beauty and the splendor of Christ, the more you know about the price that He paid on that tree, the more power, motivation, zeal you will have to give your life away. People who have made an extraordinary mark in Christian history, they have not done so because they were born better than you or born again better than you. I mean, James clears that up. Even the greatest figures in the Old Testament were of like nature with us. We see their failures, sometimes extraordinary failures. Then why is it that some people just seem to give more? I believe there's only one reason. They've seen more. They've seen more. More of what? More of who Christ is and what Christ has done and what Christ is preparing. That's it. And that's the job of the preacher. And that's the job of the individual Christian when they study the Bible. I used to hear this so often. You know, when you're reading your Bible, you read your chapter of the day, and the first thing you should ask is, what is this saying about me? That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. No, what is it saying about God? What is it saying about Christ? What is it revealing to me? You see, this is what I want you to see. If I were to get up right now and preach an hour-long sermon on how you don't love God as you ought to, your response, if you're a sincere Christian, should be, well, yeah. Thank you. I knew that. Thank you very much. Now I feel worse. And that's what preachers do, don't they? You don't love God enough. Yeah, there's my problem. You hit it on the head. Now could you keep going and tell me what I'm supposed to do? Because I'm tired. So what do people do? They run off to a conference or to some extraordinary preacher. And what happens? They get all excited. Man, they are so full of the music is amazing. They're so full of the love of God. And then after 3 days, what happens? They're right back where they started. But this time they're even more bitter. There just seems to be no escape. And all the promises of all those flashy preachers on the platform, they didn't work. And you're like just stuck there. What do I do? You're like, you go to these meetings and they wind you up like a toy. And man, you come out of there, you're like this, and then eventually you're right back where you started from. How do you make yourself love God more? How do you do that? Well, first of all, to have the capacity to love God, you must truly be Christian. But if you are truly Christian, even then, there will be a struggle. So how do you do it? Well, let me give you a lesson in physics. So let's say that I'm laying on the ground, on my back, and I've got both hands on my belt, like this, and I'm pulling with all my might. And you come in and you go, Brother Paul, what are you doing? And I say, well, I'm trying to get up. You say, well, you didn't really ever study physics, did you? Well, what do you mean? If you're going to get up that way, you must be acted upon by an outside force. You can't pull yourself up by your own belt or bootstraps. You have to be acted upon by an outside force. Okay? Now let's think about this. You see a man who has an extraordinary passion for his wife. I mean, you've never seen a guy like this. He is the most devoted man you have ever met. He is devoted. He is passionate. It's extraordinary. What do you think when you see that kind of man? What do you think? You think about the man, don't you? That's because you're an idolater. You think about the man. What a wonderful man! I mean, this man is a man of men. I mean, I've never seen a man. Women are going, why can't you be like him? Do you see that? I mean, he's just extraordinary. We think he is extraordinary. Maybe he's not extraordinary. Maybe he's not even normal. Maybe he's subnormal. Well, then how does he do this? Maybe he's being acted upon by an outside force. Maybe it's not him who's extraordinary, it's his wife. That his wife is so extraordinary, so beautiful, so full of virtue, that she draws out. This man is a brute. He's like a stump, a log. She is so extraordinary that she draws out his affections. He can't help but love her. Now, don't use this, men, as blaming your wife for why you're such a stump. So it's not him at all. It's this other extraordinary person. So you see a Christian and they seem to have an extraordinary love and an extraordinary zeal for God. And what do you think? You immediately worship the man or the woman, don't you? Oh, they're extraordinary. They're different than me. Do you see that? You've got to see this. But they've been acted upon by an outside force. They've seen something you haven't seen. And it's that beauty and virtue and wisdom and wonder. There's something you better get back in your theology or just stop preaching. The wonder of him that just takes hold of that heart and draws out its affection and controls it. Do you see that? So you don't need to tighten yourself all up and wind yourself all up and become an extraordinary person. You need to climb up a little higher and get a better view of an extraordinary God. And that's what I've seen. Why were the Puritans able to suffer the things they suffered? Why were the Reformers able to suffer the things they suffered? Why was Bunyan able to do that? 12 years in a prison. How? Well, they were so intellectual. No. They knew the confessions. No. They had seen him. How could Paul do what he did? How could he suffer like he suffered? There was nothing left of the man when they lopped off his head. He saw him. He saw him. And a lot of people think, when Paul saw Jesus on the road to Damascus, that, like Jesus was standing there on a rock or something, looking at Paul. Paul, what? No, I don't believe that at all. I believe what Paul saw there on the road to Damascus is very similar to what Isaiah saw in Isaiah 6. In Isaiah 6, John 12 tells us Isaiah saw the Christ. He saw that. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw also the Lord high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the temple, and above him stood the seraphim, each one having 6 wings. With 2 they covered their face, with 2 they covered their feet, and with 2 they did fly. And one cried unto the other, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. And the posts of the door moved at the voice of him who cried, and the house was filled with smoke. Then said I, Woe is me, for I am undone. I'm disintegrated. Mine eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. That's what he saw. That's what he saw. And that's what we need to see. And through the Spirit of God, we can see that in the Word. We can see that in preaching. We can see that in prayer. We can see that. We can know Him in a greater way. It's a vision of Him that should propel our piety, or our piety is idolatry. It's just a morality in which we're patting ourselves on the back because we're not like everybody else. Now, I want to take this one step further, go over to 2 Corinthians. Chapter 5. Verse 13, For if we are beside ourselves, it is for God. If we are of sound mind, it is for you. There will always be in the believer who prays something apocalyptic and strange. They're a speckled bird. They don't fit anymore. They say things and do things that seem a bit out of order. Paul's devotion was extraordinary. He would suffer extraordinary things so that people would say, You're a madman. He would speak about extraordinary things. You're a madman. Paul, this is just too much. How can you see Him without it affecting you in some strange way? He says in verse 14, For the love of Christ controls us. Controls us, constrains us. It not only keeps us from sin, but compels us to righteousness, to devotion. Now, here's what you need to understand. The genitive here is extremely important.